Have you ever had the feeling that something in your life is about to change? Not just a small change, but something deeper. A shift you cannot fully explain. Maybe lately you've been noticing things around you starting to feel different. Doors that once seemed wide open are suddenly closing. People you once felt close to are slowly drifting away. Situations that once felt comfortable now feel unfamiliar. And deep down inside, there's a quiet question in your heart. God, what is happening in my life right now? Because sometimes, when God begins to move in your life, things don't always make sense at first. In fact, before God brings a breakthrough, before He opens a new door, before He takes you into a new season, He often begins preparing you in ways you didn't expect. And that preparation can feel confusing. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like isolation. Sometimes it feels like everything is shifting all at once. But what if these moments are not random? What if the changes you are experiencing right now are actually signs that God is preparing to transform your life? Today, we are going to talk about 5 powerful signs that God may be preparing to change your life in ways you never imagined. And if you recognize these signs in your life, then what God is about to do next might surprise you. Before we talk about the signs, we need to understand something important. God never moves in your life without purpose. Even when things seem confusing, even when situations feel uncertain, God is still working behind the scenes. The Bible reminds us of this truth in Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Think about that for a moment. God already has a plan for your life. Not a random plan, not a careless plan, but a plan designed with purpose. However, before God brings you into a new season, He often prepares you first. Because the person you are today may not yet be the person ready to receive what God is about to give you. And that preparation can sometimes feel uncomfortable. Sometimes God allows situations that stretch your faith. Sometimes He removes people from your life. Sometimes He closes doors you thought would stay open forever. Not because He has forgotten you, but because He is preparing you for something greater. And when God begins that preparation, there are often signs. Let's talk about the first sign that God may be preparing to change your life. Things that once felt comfortable begin to change. The first sign that God may be preparing to change your life is this. Things that once felt comfortable begin to feel different. Places that once felt familiar suddenly feel uncomfortable. Situations that once felt safe no longer feel right. And sometimes you cannot even explain why. You may find yourself looking at your life and realizing that the things that used to satisfy you no longer bring the same peace. The environment you once felt secure in now feels limiting. The routine you once followed now feels like something is missing. And in those moments, it can be confusing, because part of you wants to hold on to what is familiar, but another part of you feels like God is calling you towards something more. This is something many people experience right before God begins a new chapter in their lives. When God prepares you for change, He often begins by shifting your spirit. He places a sense of restlessness inside your heart, not because He wants to make you uncomfortable, but because He is preparing you to move. Think about the story of Abraham in the Bible. Abraham lived in a place that was familiar to him. He had a life there. He had security there. But one day, God called him to leave everything behind and go to a land he had never seen before. Imagine how confusing that must have felt. Leaving comfort, leaving familiarity, leaving everything he knew. But that uncomfortable moment became the beginning of God's incredible promise in Abraham's life. And sometimes God works the same way in our lives. Before He leads us to a new season, He begins by making the old season feel too small. He begins to stir something inside our hearts. A feeling that says, you were made for something more. So if you have been feeling lately like the things that once felt comfortable are starting to feel different, do not ignore that feeling. It may not be confusion. It may be God preparing you for change. Certain people begin to leave your life. The second sign that God may be preparing to change your life is this. Certain people begin to leave your life. This is one of the most difficult signs to understand, because relationships are powerful. The people around us often shape how we see ourselves, how we see the world, and sometimes even how we see God. So when someone suddenly walks away, when friendships begin to fade, when relationships you once thought would last forever begin to change, it can feel painful. Sometimes you may even ask God, why is this happening? But what many people do not realize is that sometimes God removes people from your life to protect your future. Not everyone who is meant to walk with you in one season is meant to walk with you into the next one. Some people were part of your story, but they were never meant to be part of your destination. And when God begins preparing you for something greater, He often begins by removing influences that cannot go where He is taking you. Sometimes those people carry negativity. Sometimes they carry doubt. Sometimes they simply cannot understand the path God has prepared for you. And if they remained in your life, they might unknowingly hold you back from becoming the person God created you to be. The Bible shows us examples of this many times. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers before he stepped into the destiny God had prepared for him. David spent years separated from people he trusted before he became king. Even Jesus experienced betrayal before fulfilling his purpose. Sometimes separation is not punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. God is clearing space in your life for the people, opportunities, and blessings that belong in your next season. So if you have been experiencing distance in relationships, if certain people are suddenly leaving your life, do not always assume something is wrong. Sometimes God is simply doing what only He can do. He is making room for what is coming next. Unexpected challenges begin to appear. The third sign that God may be preparing to change your life is this. Unexpected challenges begin to appear. At first, this may seem strange, because when we think about God preparing something good for us, we often imagine things becoming easier. We imagine doors opening quickly. We imagine everything falling perfectly into place. But in reality, many of the greatest transformations in the Bible began with challenges. Sometimes right before God changes your life, the situation around you actually becomes more difficult. You may begin facing obstacles you did not expect, problems that seem unfair, situations that test your patience, moments that challenge your faith. And during those moments, it can feel discouraging. You might even begin to wonder, God, if you are with me, why is this happening? But what many people do not realize is that challenges often appear right before a breakthrough. Because God does not only prepare the blessing, He prepares the person who will receive the blessing. And preparation requires growth. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph had a dream from God that he would one day rise to a great position. But before that dream came true, Joseph went through years of hardship. He was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. From the outside, it may have looked like his life was falling apart. But in reality, God was preparing him. Every challenge Joseph faced shaped his character. It strengthened his faith. It developed his wisdom. It prepared him for the responsibility that was coming. And eventually, Joseph rose from prison to become one of the most powerful leaders in Egypt. Sometimes God allows challenges not to destroy you, but to develop you. So if you have been facing unexpected struggles lately, do not assume that your life is moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes the pressure you feel right now is simply part of God. You begin to feel a strong inner calling. The fourth sign that God may be preparing to change your life is this. You begin to feel a strong inner calling. At first, it may feel very subtle. A quiet thought in your mind. A feeling in your heart that keeps returning again and again. Something inside you begins whispering that your life is meant for something more. You may begin thinking about changes you never considered before. New dreams start forming in your mind. New ideas begin to appear. And even though you may not fully understand them yet, the feeling continues to grow. Sometimes it feels like God is gently pulling you toward a new direction. This is something many people experience when God is preparing them for a new season. Because before God changes your circumstances, He often begins by changing your heart. He places a vision inside you, a sense that you were created for a purpose greater than what you are currently experiencing. The Bible shows us this pattern many times. When God called Moses, it began with a moment that captured his attention. When God called David, it began with a quiet season where no one expected anything special from him. When God called Esther, she was placed in a position she never imagined she would have. In each of these stories, God first stirred something inside their hearts. Because God does not force people into purpose. He calls them. And that calling often begins with an inner awareness. A realization that your life is part of something bigger than you once believed. So if you have been feeling a new desire growing inside your heart, a desire to grow, a desire to step into something different, a desire to follow a path that feels uncertain but meaningful. Do not ignore that feeling. Sometimes that quiet calling is the beginning of God preparing you for the next chapter of your life. Doors begin to open unexpectedly. The fifth sign that God may be preparing to change your life is this. Doors begin to open unexpectedly. After seasons of waiting, after moments of confusion, after challenges that seemed endless, something begins to shift. Opportunities begin appearing in ways you did not plan. Situations begin changing in ways you did not expect. And sometimes, the door that opens is not even the one you were looking for. Because when God moves, He often moves in ways that surprise us. The Bible reminds us of this truth in Revelation 3 verse 8, where it says, "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." Think about that. When God opens a door in your life, no human power can close it. And when God decides that a new season has arrived for you, things can begin changing very quickly. Sometimes it begins with a single opportunity, a conversation, a new connection, a moment that seems small but carries great meaning. Other times, it may be a door you thought was permanently closed suddenly opening again. The key thing to remember is this. When God prepares you for a new chapter, He does not only prepare you, He also prepares the path ahead of you. That means the right people appear, the right opportunities arrive, the right doors begin to open at the right time. And when those moments happen, you begin to realize something powerful. God was guiding you all along. Every uncomfortable moment, every challenge, every season of waiting, it was all leading to the moment when God would begin moving things into place. So if you have recently started noticing unexpected opportunities appearing in your life, if doors that once seemed impossible are slowly beginning to open, take a moment to thank God, because it may be the sign that a new season is beginning. And what God is about to do next may be greater than anything you imagined. Let us pray together. Heavenly Father, right now, I lift up every person watching this video. You know their hearts. You know their struggles. You know the seasons they are walking through right now. Lord, some of them feel confused. Some feel tired from waiting. Some are wondering why certain doors have closed, why certain relationships have changed, and why life seems so uncertain. But today, we are reminded that you are a God who is always working behind